Making headlines for this week of September the 5th. Silence of the guns. Reports today indicate an agreement has been reached for a ceasefire in Ukraine. Pushing the panic button. Pro-UK supporters in a state of fear and chaos amid a surge in support for a sovereign Scotland. Mortgages, debt, and securitization. Why your mortgage may no longer be valid. And GMO agenda. New information reveals a Monsanto agenda may be behind the Western aggression to control Ukraine.
With news around, upon, within, and beyond our planet, the program making disclosure official. This is Cosmic Vision News. Here is Jeffrey West.
Greetings and blessings to all from Stockholm, Sweden. As we enter into the final few weeks of the summer season for North America, the historically quieter month of August usually begins to ramp up with activities of various geopolitical and geoeconomic kinds to varying degrees. It is perhaps debatable as to whether or not August has been quieter or more active than in past years. There are, however, various online sources indicating that August certainly was active energetically, if not geopolitically. We focus, however, on the geopolitical scene, and the events and energies continue to play themselves out in Ukraine this week. Over the last few days, meetings have been taking place both within the NATO alliance, but also directly between Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko. The breaking news being reported by RT on the afternoon of September the 5th was that Poroshenko was calling for a ceasefire as of 1500 hours Greenwich Mean Time. RT was reporting on the 5th that Kiev officials and representatives of the two self-proclaimed republics in southeastern Ukraine have agreed to a ceasefire as the contact group met behind closed doors in Belarus. The truce agreement comes into force starting at 1800 hours local time, which would be 1500 hours Greenwich. The president has ordered to cease fire starting at the time stated in the protocol. I give the order to the Chief of the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces to cease fire starting from 1800 local time on September 5th, Poroshenko's statement says. Poroshenko then called on both the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE, to provide international monitoring of compliance with the bilateral ceasefire. The self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic earlier confirmed the ceasefire agreement on its official Twitter account. According to the leader of the Lugansk movement, Igor Plotnitsky, most of the points in the ceasefire protocol correspond with their demands. Representatives of both rebel groups have stated their intention and desire to honor the ceasefire so long as Kiev honors its side. RT quoted Plotnitsky as saying that the ceasefire, however, does not mean a shift from our course of breaking away from Ukraine. This is a compulsory measure. The representative for the OSCE, Heidi Tagliavini, indicated that the protocol consisted of 12 points, with the ceasefire being the most important one. This particular protocol may have been a compromise from the 7-point plan offered by Putin several days ago and a 17-point plan offered by Poroshenko last June. An article appearing on the BricsPost.com website on September the 5th reported that China has put its weight of support behind the plan being proposed by Putin. The article quotes Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Qin Gang as saying that we have acknowledged President Vladimir Putin's 7-point plan and hope this proposal can facilitate a more political solution to the tensions. The 7 points offered by Putin. 1. Militias should cease military advances in the Donetsk and Lugansk regions. 2. Pro-Kiev forces should withdraw to a distance that excludes the possibility of shelling settlements. 3. Implement full and objective international control over the ceasefire. 4. Exclude the use of combat aircraft against civilians and villages. 5. A prisoner-captive exchange via an all-in-all formula without preconditions. 6. Humanitarian corridors for refugees movement and delivery of humanitarian aid across Donetsk and Lugansk regions. And 7. Direct repair crew access to destroyed social and transit infrastructure with supportive aid. The article continues. In Ukraine, meanwhile, Putin's peace plan was met with criticism from the country's Prime Minister, Arseniy Yatsenyuk, who said that Russia's real plan is to destroy Ukraine and restore the USSR. We are waiting for decisions from NATO and the EU on how to stop the aggressor, he said. In Yatsenyuk's opinion, Putin's 7-point plan is, quote, an attempt of eyewash for the international community ahead of the NATO summit, and an attempt to avoid inevitable decisions from the EU on the new wave of sanctions against Russia, unquote. The best for Ukraine would be a 1-point plan, Yatsenyuk stressed, which is the withdrawal of Russian troops from Ukraine. And then there will be peace, the PM said. OSCE sources have apparently claimed that no Russian troops or equipment have been within Ukrainian borders, despite strong accusations to the contrary by Kiev and Western sources. At this point, I can only advise that anything you hear regarding this conflict should be taken with discernment. A Russian friend of mine in Sweden has today informed me that even though there is talk about an alleged truce, there is apparently fighting still ongoing in another Ukrainian city, Mariupol, that is not being covered by the mainstream media. There appears to be greater attention being placed on the two regions of Donetsk and Lugansk. Whether Mariupol is part of the truce agreement being proposed on September the 5th is unclear. A little later on in the newscast, you will hear a story relating to the influence of this events in Ukraine by biotech companies like Monsanto. And although it is unclear at this time, there might be cause for suspicion that the Donetsk and Lugansk regions are among the more fertile regions of the country, leading to the actions that are now being taken in these regions. The fact is, we do not know exactly what is going on over there and why. It might seem that this geopolitical chess game is just another smoke and mirrors event to keep people distracted from other things allegedly taking place on a higher geopolitical level. Exactly what those events are still remains unknown, and it is unlikely that the world will begin to hear about those events until the sources involved are ready to reveal this information. At this time, it is not even worth attempting to speculate why certain games continue to be played and why the Western forces and media are still being allowed to get away with their games. For now, there must be a reason for it, and all that can be done from the perspective of the people of the world is to continue holding a higher vision for global peace and send some positive energies of love and healing to not only Ukraine, but to Gaza and to the Jewish people who truly desire a world of peace and not a conditional peace being marketed by global forces tied to the Zionist agenda. In a few short weeks, on September the 18th, the people of Scotland will be making a decision that has the potential to fundamentally shake the geopolitical structure of the United Kingdom and perhaps loosely NATO, and the European Union. An article on the London Guardian website from last February 11th noted the following. It is about time that British politics got real about the referendum. Not the hypothetical referendum on the European Union that may or may not take place in 5 years, depending on the outcome of the 2015 general election. Instead, the real referendum that should be concentrating political minds throughout Britain. This is the one that will definitely take place next year, irrespective of any election, to settle whether Scotland remains part of the United Kingdom or breaks away from it. Though there's lots going on, it is all taking place in a difficult political climate for Alex Salmond's Scottish Government and the SNP. The SNP's electoral triumph in Scotland in 2011 has proved to be a double-edged claymore. On the one hand, SNP's success gave the independence cause the greatest opportunity of its lifetime, that of putting Scotland's national future to the vote. On the other, it compelled the SNP to fight a set-piece political battle about the single issue of independence, which the opinion polls consistently show is not supported by most Scots. Over the past year, the SNP has struggled to translate its dominance of Scottish party politics into an equivalent momentum on the independence issue. By and large, the polls on Scotland's future have not shifted. In spite of all Mr. Salmon's efforts, he looks at the moment to be leading his clans to defeat. Skip forward now to September 2nd, and an article on RT.com is reporting that support for Scottish independence is at its highest level ever, according to a new poll, with nationalists rapidly closing the gap against Unionists just 2 weeks before the Scots vote on whether to split from the UK. YouGov's poll showed the Unionist lead had shrunk from 22% a month ago to just 6%. Overall, support for independence leapt to 47% in August. The figures published in The Sun suggest a significant shift in opinion ahead of the September 18th referendum. The poll, which questioned 1,063 people, was carried out between August 28th and September the 1st. The Yes campaign has never been ahead in a YouGov survey. The spike in support, however, indicates the vote will be closer than many expected. The article goes on to note that, according to YouGov, the swing was likely down to the success of Yes campaigners in convincing voters of an independent Scotland's economic potential. First Minister Alex Salmond's victory in his final televised debate against Better Together chairman Alistair Darling also seems to have provided a boost. More and more people are beginning to realize that a yes vote is Scotland's one opportunity to make that enormous wealth work better for everybody who lives and works here, said Blair Jenkins, head of the Independence campaign team. This breakthrough poll shows that yes has the momentum. We only need another 3-point swing to achieve a yes for Scotland on September the 18th, he told The Guardian. While the No campaign press the panic button and blame each other for a series of blunders, Yes will get on with the job of persuading more of our fellow citizens, both No and the undecided voters, that we need a yes vote to put Scotland's future in Scotland's hands. Those connected to the EU, the global banking cabal, and other interests that are fearful of what a Scottish separation might mean are already attempting to impose their conditions and restrictions upon the population, perhaps in the hope of preventing a yes vote from materializing. A Washington Post article by Griff Uvitte on August 24th has noted that a Scottish separation from the UK may jeopardize Britain's Trident nuclear program. According to Uvitte, for decades, Britain's contribution to the threat of global Armageddon has found a home on the tranquil shores of Gairloch, where soaring green mountains plunge into murky grey waters plied by sporty kayakers, weekend yachtsmen, and nuclear-armed submarines. But if Scotland votes yes in an independence referendum next month, the submarines could become nuclear-armed nomads without a port to call home. Washington's closest and most important ally could, in turn, be left without the ultimate deterrent, even as Europe's borders are being rattled anew by a resurgent Russia. Former NATO Secretary General George Robertson, a Scotsman, said in a speech in Washington earlier this year that a vote for independence would be cataclysmic for Western security, and that ejecting the nuclear submarines from Scotland would amount to disarming the remainder of the United Kingdom. At the same time, this might also be Scotland's leverage against the global cabal. A London Guardian article by Severin Carroll and Katie Allen on September the 2nd has reported that the former EU Commissioner for Monetary Union said it would not be possible for an independent Scotland to join the EU if it used the pound without a formal currency deal or its own central bank. Olli Rehn, who stood down in July as the European Commissioner for Monetary Union and the Euro, wrote to Danny Alexander, the Chief Secretary of the Treasury this week, to say having a central bank was an essential requirement of EU membership. The question, of course, is whether this central bank would be one that is controlled by the global banking cabal, or whether it might be one that is more in alignment with the BRICS alliance of countries. Based on the results of the recent EU election and the anti-EU sentiment existing within Europe, but also within Scotland, joining the EU may not be very high up on the list of priorities for a birthing Celtic nation. Irish journalist Brian MacDonald, whose opinion editorial piece was picked up by RT on September the 3rd, wrote that support for Scottish independence has risen 8 percentage points in a month and momentum is firmly in its favour. MacDonald asks, have the Scots now got the desire to become a nation once again? MacDonald goes on, amid all the adulation of its culture and its unique people, the obstacle to true unconditional love has always been its curious willingness to remain inside the United Kingdom, ruled from London and unable to make its own choices. For an Irishman, raised on tales of valour and devotion to freedom, this is almost impossible to fathom. Is it not better to make your own mistakes and stand by them without having failures imposed by others? Conversely, are glories not sweeter when they are created by thine own hand? For Scots afraid to take the plunge, I have this to propose. Take the short trip to Dublin and ask one random person on the street, should Ireland rejoin the UK? After they had finished laughing at you, they'd probably suggest medical help of some sort. Our sovereignty makes us what we are. It unites Irish people, even those scattered around the planet, as one single idea, and it defines us. Through the zeniths and nadirs, we all know that we have a home, which we govern ourselves, that we can return to or happily stay in, no matter what. It comes beyond money and other fleeting factors. It's about identity and a sense of place. On Thursday, September 18th, Scotland has a chance to do with the stroke of pens what Ireland had to force through the barrel of a gun, a chance to be a nation once again. What is confusing for most people is the understanding and practical application of a 5D vision of oneness within a society struggling through a 3D experience of separation, illusion, power, and control. Humanity has been taught to think in terms of separation, and yet the powers that have enslaved humanity are attempting to create unions of control. The European Union, the North American Union, the African Union, the Asian Union, and finally the one world government of total corporate and elitist control over humanity and our planet. Those who are not aware of the global control may welcome the idea of a government where everyone plays by the same rules, even if they are enslaved to those rules. Those who are awake and aware are attempting to preserve their uniquely different yet equally beautiful status within a different interpretation of the oneness of life, a higher vibration interpretation that the global cabal has corrupted to suit a less honorable agenda. The confusion is perhaps understandable. So the discernment becomes necessary, as does one's own personal definition of truth, of freedom, of peace, but of also service to humanity and our planet. In financial news, it was back in mid-August that Ambrose Evans Pritchard, writing for the London Telegraph, reported on August 14th that France was rebelling against austerity as European recovery collapses. According to Evans Pritchard, the Eurozone strategy is in tatters after economic recovery ground to a halt across the region, and France demanded a radical shift in policy, warning that austerity overkill is driving Europe into a depression. Michel Sapin France's finance minister sent tremors through the European capitals with a defiant warning that his country would no longer try to meet its deficit targets and would not inflict further damage on its economy by tightening into the downturn. "I refuse to raise taxes to close any budget gaps," he said. We must face the figures in front of us with realism. The truth is that, contrary to the forecasts of the International Monetary Fund and the European Commission, growth has broken down both in France and in Europe. The ECB will do as little as possible in the hope that something will come along to save them and the euro will weaken, Gabriel Stein from Oxford Economics said. They are desperate not to do a quantitative easing. It appears that things were starting to break down within the French government at the same time. BusinessInsider.com reported on August 25th that France's Prime Minister Manuel Valls presented the resignation of his government to the president on Monday, François Hollande's office said in a statement. The statement said a new government would be formed on Tuesday in line with the direction he, meaning the president, has defined for our country. The move comes a day after leftist economy minister Arnaud Montebourg called for a new economic policy and questioned what he called Germany's obsession with budgetary rigor. France is the Eurozone's second biggest economy, the world's fifth greatest power, and it does not intend to align itself, ladies and gentlemen, with the excessive obsessions of Germany's conservatives, Montebourg said on Sunday. France is not only under a mountain of economic problems, but both President Hollande and Prime Minister Valls are far down in terms of popular support, according to national polls. It was also at this time that IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde was personally drawn into a French corruption case. Some reports had her being charged, while other reports indicated a formal investigation was underway. The charges relate to her time as French finance minister. However, in light of the news from France, a surprise from the European Central Bank President Mario Draghi came on September the 4th. Miles Udland, in an article on the BusinessInsider.com website on September the 4th, reported that the European Central Bank just unexpectedly cut rates. Speculation in media circles was rampant, but for those who are following more closely the global changes, there may be hints in here of what is to come. The article continues. Following the report, Klaus Vistisen, chief Eurozone economist at Pantheon Macroeconomics, said, in one line, surprise rate cuts point to currency now being a key policy tool. Vistisen added, the further tweak in conventional monetary policy was a surprise, given the Governing Council had noted that the central bank was essentially already at its lower bound. The only real interpretation that makes sense here is that the Governing Council now sees currency as an active and important policy tool. I'd like to bring your attention back to that last sentence. The only real interpretation that makes sense here is that the Governing Council now sees that currency as an active and important policy tool. There has been growing talk about the movement towards gold and metals-backed currencies, which, as many will know, brings value to currencies as opposed to the now dying fiat currency system, which has no value. Assuming this statement to be true, it could be the revelation that the Basel III Protocol is now in effect and that currencies are either now or on the verge of becoming items of greater value. Not being an economist, nor having any inside connections, I do not ask you to accept this as truth. I offer it as a thought for consideration that may or may not resonate with you. In the follow-up of all the summer activity in South America over the summer with the BRICS Summit, the World Cup, and the numerous visits of Russian and Chinese leaders throughout the South American continent, changes seem to be moving forward to prepare for at least some geopolitical or geoeconomic shifts. In one example, RT reported on August 30th that Ecuador is planning to create the world's first digital currency issued by the country's central bank, in what is seen by many as a step to abandon the US dollar, the currency now used by the Central American country. The currency is expected to start circulating in December, according to the bank. The technical details or the name of the currency have not been revealed, although the officials stated that it would not be a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin. The new currency is expected to coexist with the US dollar, the current official money Ecuador uses, and will be channeled for 2.8 million people in the country, 40% of the participants in the economy who are too poor to afford the usual banking. There is perhaps one point to this story that seems to suggest a lack of confidence, and that is the fact that the currency will be voluntary and it will not be used to pay the state employees. If something were to go wrong, for example, this would mean that the poorer people would suffer, but the state employees would not suffer, and this likely would also mean that they would not rebel if something happened. It has been speculated that this is a move towards dumping the US dollar. The article adds that Nathalie Reinelt, an emerging payments analyst with the US-based Ait Group, told Associated Press that she doesn't see any other motivation for creating such a currency. The US dollar was set as the Ecuadorian currency in the year 2000 after a massive banking crisis hit the country. Even nowadays, the country is 11 billion in debt, mostly to China. With 11 billion in debts to China and not to the US, it is more and more understandable why countries would seek to avoid using the US dollar as a global reserve currency, as transfers via the US dollar only hurt the countries involved while profiting the industrial military complex machine. Stepping into the digital age may also allow more direct and immediate money transfers, again, possibly bypassing any controls that the global banking cabal may still have on the international movement of currencies. As a system of valued currencies slowly begins to step in to replace the dying fiat currency system, this system will start to fade. How fast this happens may depend upon how quickly people wake up to see and understand the fraud that has been perpetuated by the existing banking system. Are you still one who is having some challenges making sense of the whole financial scam that housing mortgages are a part of, how they contribute to banking profits, and why the banks are now going bust? If so, perhaps something in this next story may resonate with you. There are different ways of explaining it, and some will be more clear to people than other explanations. We'll start first with this audio clip, which will in some ways be familiar to many.
Banking, the greatest scam on earth. Thomas Jefferson said, "I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, the banks will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered." Jefferson's warning is already here. 40 million Americans are living on food stamps. Millions more are now homeless, living in tents, all because of one institution, the Federal Reserve System. The Federal Reserve is a group of private bankers who have stolen the money creation process from the American people. Most people still believe the Fed is an agency of the government working in our best interests. It is not. There is no greater form of evil in the world today, so let's explore the banking scam. None of us have ever been taught anything about money. The reason is to prevent us from learning the truth that money is a trick and money is a trap. When solving any crime, there's a universal truth: follow the money, but with the banking scam, follow it backwards. Where does money come from? The world's money supply is always growing. Where does all the new money keep coming from? Money comes from privately controlled global banks like the Federal Reserve System. They create money every day, which increases the world's money supply. Because all banks are either owned or controlled by private bankers, the real question is, how do private bankers create new money? And the answer is they create it out of thin air. Bankers create money out of nothing. They make it up. It is a fiction. Wow. godlike power to create something of value out of nothing. A stroke of a keyboard and money is created. In fact, only 3% of the world's money is even in the form of bills and coins, which means 97% of all money in the world is just numbers typed on a computer screen. This is part one of the banking scam. Money is created out of nothing. The second part of the scam is this phony money is issued as debt. What is debt exactly? Well, when you consider we work our whole lives to pay it off, you could say debt is slavery. But whose debt is this phony money? It's our debt, all of it. It's our debt when we use credit cards, we get student loans, borrow money for mortgages, all bank borrowing. And it's our debt, again, when the government borrows, which is each and every day. In today's world, money is debt, and debt is money, and don't forget the interest charges. Money equals debt, and debt equals slavery. Therefore, money equals slavery. Our monetary system is a carefully concealed system of slavery. Why? Because our government can create the same money for free with no interest charges, just like they used to, as the Founding Fathers designed it inside the United States Constitution for our protection against private bankers. The third part of the banking scam is very evil. When bankers create money from nothing and issue it as debt, they only create the principal portion of the debt. They do not create the money for the future interest payments. There is not enough money in existence for all of us to make our interest payments. In fact, our money creation system is even mathematically impossible. Money issued by the banks, principal debt, does not equal the money demanded back to the banks, principal plus interest. We are forced to play a game of musical chairs to see who can make their debt repayments. This guarantees a world of bankruptcy, competition, and scarcity of money. For example, we go to the bank to borrow money for a house, let's say $100,000. The moment we sign the loan document, the bank creates the money out of thin air. A $100,000 debit gets registered for us and $100,000 secured credit for them. Then one of two things happens. Either we give the bank 30 years of labor making house payments totaling $300,000 for the original $100,000 we borrowed, or the bank takes our house. The bankers get either our labor for life or our house, and often they get both, all from money created out of thin air and issued as debt, for money made out of nothing. This is why all the bankers end up with all the assets. The fourth part of the banking scam is inflation. People think inflation is prices and costs increase. A better answer might be the value of our money always goes down. Inflation is created every time the central banks print money, which is every day. Where does all this new money get its value? The answer is it steals its value from the existing money supply, where our savings are. Our savings are disappearing because of the new money they're printing. If money creation was in balance with goods and services, there would be no inflation. Prices would stay the same. But the reality is banks always print money, driving prices ever higher, which steals the value of our savings, making them disappear. Since the private bankers created the private Federal Reserve in 1913, the United States dollar has lost 97 cents in purchasing power. An item in 1913 that cost $100 in 2011 cost $2,230, a price increase of 2,130%. This is the banking scam. 4 parts. Private bankers create money out of nothing and charge interest on it. There is no money created for the future interest payments, and inflation steals our savings every day. In order for the banking scam to be pulled over our eyes, the bankers need help from the likes of paid-for politicians and appointed civil servants, military-industrial complex, mainstream media, multinational corporations, and the bankers' good buddies. For example, what do our banker-controlled television networks say about criminal bankers? Oh, bankers are our saviors. Chairman is man of the year. He saved the world. Bankers really do deserve their bonuses. They're so smart. And what do our banker-owned G20 politicians say we need to do? that we must save our banking system, and now we need austerity measures like increasing existing taxes and bringing in new taxes, cutting our social programs, including education and health care, stealing from our pension plans while increasing the retirement age, keeping us working for more years at lower wages while placing our children and grandchildren in debt and servitude for their future lives. We are being lied to that we must go deeper in debt for bailouts, stimulus packages, quantitative easing, saving the too big to fail banks, credit easing, currency interventions, all names that mean the same thing, more debt to us. Is it not strange that the solution to too much debt is always more debt to us?
A couple of stories from several months ago over in Europe also suggest a shift is occurring. People are becoming informed, and institutions may slowly be hinting at changes taking place. An article appearing on the irishexaminer.com website from last March 12th. A reader dared to ask a question that others either did not know or perhaps were afraid to ask. If banks sell mortgages to investors via the securitization industry, how were they ever bust? The reader offers the answer in writing that pension funds, insurance companies, hedge funds, and so forth buy mortgages and pay banks the principal plus a premium as an upfront and lump sum payment. Therefore, the bank is paid in full once for the mortgage. The monthly payments of the homeowners are passed by the banks to the investors. Over the life of the mortgage, the investor earns more than they paid up front to the banks due to interest payments. This is admitted, albeit grudgingly, by banks. They can no longer deny securitization. But how do they explain being bust? They should be in extra credit from the profit above the principal that the investor paid to them. Are the banks keeping shadow books? Is their securitized income declared for tax? Where is that money? How did the banks all arrive in government buildings in 2008 saying they needed to be bailed out overnight or the country would go bust when their mortgages were all already paid in full? How can any bank in Ireland lay claim to the title of any house in Ireland if they have sold this right to others? It was about a week after this article, the 18th of March, that the London Guardian ran an article of its own. The writer, David Graeber, reported that last week, again this is back in March, something remarkable happened. The Bank of England let the cat out of the bag. In a paper called Money Creation in the Modern Economy, co-authored by 3 economists from the bank's Monetary Analysis Directorate, they stated outright that most common assumptions of how banking works are simply wrong, and that the kind of populist, heterodox positions more ordinarily associated with groups such as Occupy Wall Street are correct. In doing so, they have effectively thrown the entire theoretical basis for austerity out of the window. What the Bank of England admitted that week, is that none of this is really true. To quote from its own initial summary, rather than banks receiving deposits when households save and then lending them out, bank lending creates deposits. In normal times, the central bank does not fix the amount of money in circulation, nor is central bank money multiplied up into more loans and deposits. Graeber continues, in other words, everything we know is not just wrong, it's backwards. When banks make loans, they create money. This is because money is really just an IOU. The role of the central bank is to preside over a legal order that effectively grants banks the exclusive right to create IOUs of a certain kind, ones that the government will recognize as legal tender by its willingness to accept them in payment of taxes. There's really no limit on how much banks could create, provided they can find someone willing to borrow it. What this means is that the real limit on the amount of money in circulation is not how much the central bank is willing to lend, but how much government, firms, and ordinary citizens are willing to borrow. Government spending is the main driver in all this, and the paper does admit, if you read it carefully, that the central bank does fund the government after all. So there's no question of public spending crowding out private investment. It's exactly the opposite. In his article, Graeber does note two things. First, the political risk that an admission like this could potentially have. Just consider what might happen if mortgage holders realized the money the bank lent them is not really the life savings of some thrifty pensioner, but something the bank just whisked into existence through its possession of a magic wand which we, the public, handed over to it. Secondly, he notes that the Bank of England has tended to be a bellwether, staking out seemingly radical positions that ultimately become new practices. Perhaps this was a subtle hint of preparing for what is now unfolding. In general news for the week, the London Guardian initially reported on August the 6th a story about an Austrian lawyer, Max Schrems, who is planning to file a class action lawsuit against the European branch of Facebook, based in Dublin, Ireland. At that time, the Guardian had reported that Schrems has been challenging the social network's use of data through his Europe versus Facebook.org campaign and the Data Protection Commission in Ireland, and has more than 20 active complaints of alleged data breaches filed with the watchdog. The class action claims Facebook Ireland is in breach of European law on users' data, and it violates rights by tracking internet use on external sites, including the use of the like buttons. It also attacks Facebook's analysis of users through what it calls big data systems. Schrems claims the company supports the PRISM surveillance program, the U.S. Secret Service's worldwide monitoring and data mining exposed by the whistleblower Edward Snowden. Later in August, on the 22nd, RT reported that Facebook has been given 4 weeks to respond to the class action launched against it by the Austrian activist and supported by over 60,000 users. The suit claims Facebook violated users' privacy by cooperating with the NSA's PRISM program. The class action initiated by Schrems, an Austrian lawyer, a data privacy activist, and founder of the Europe versus Facebook group, has passed its first review in the Vienna Regional Court. Facebook Ireland, which runs the social network's activities outside the US and Canada, has been given 4 weeks to respond to the action. Essentially, what this means is that Canadians and US citizens are unable to be a part of this particular action. Given that Facebook Ireland was given 4 weeks to reply, this means that a response should be forthcoming sometime within the coming week. For European listeners who may wish to join the class action, and for those of other countries who may also be eligible, links will be provided in the show summary for more information. It will not come as much of a surprise for most listeners to hear that corporate interests are attempting to take control of natural resources. Of course, there is oil and other resources, but most might not expect corporate interests to attempt to take control of water supplies. It was early in June that Abby Martin, on her program Breaking the Set, called out Nestle Corporation on what it claims is a right to privatize water. Here are a few quick highlights of that particular commentary.
When it comes to the issue of mega corporations and their shady dealings over the food products we consume, the focus on Monsanto can make it easy to overlook other corporations that are just, if not more dangerous to the public good. Which is why today I want to talk a little bit about Nestle, the largest food company in the world. Nestle Group is based in Switzerland and takes in an estimated $1 billion in annual revenue. And no, not just from chocolate milk sales. You see, Nestle serves as an umbrella corporation for over 29 different brands, including several varieties of bottled water, like Arrowhead, Deer Park, Ice Mountain, Ozarka, Poland Spring, and Zephyr Hills. Nestle, which operates in 86 different countries, pursues ways to remove the restrictions that would prevent it from pumping water during droughts. Yes, droughts. You know, when there's no water. Because heaven forbid Nestle misses a penny of that $54 million % profit, just because a few villagers are dying of thirst. At this point, you're probably wondering how it's even possible for one corporation to make such a staggering, mind-blowing profit margin on a natural resource that should be a right, not a privilege. Well, it could have something to do with the philosophy of a man named Peter Brabeck, Nestle's CEO. According to him, water should be privatized and applied a price like every other resource on the planet. He even goes as far as suggesting that the idea that water's a right of all people is an extreme one. Whoa! Better watch out for those extremist human beings who dare assume that they have a right to something they can't live without. So the next time you reach for that bottled water, think about Nestle, the big corporation that's immensely profiting while sucking the world dry, leaving millions of people without a drop to drink.
Several weeks later, a reply was received from Nestle directed at Martin.
So you guys may remember that a few weeks ago I called out Nestle, the largest food company in the world, which raked in almost $12 billion in sheer profit last year. I criticized the company specifically for its corporate takeover of water, because you see, Nestle owns multiple brands of water, including this one right here, Poland Spring. In fact, bottled water might just be Nestle's most lucrative product. Well, shortly after that video aired, this network received a vaguely threatening letter from Nestle, accusing me of making a series of, quote, offensive and hysterical allegations that have no basis in fact. According to Nestle, one of those allegations was that I accused the company of, quote, leaving villagers dying of thirst and sucking the world dry, leaving millions of people without a drop to drink. Wow, Nestle, ever heard of the term hyperbole? Clearly, I'm not saying that Nestle's literally stealing the entirety of the world's water supply. But if you think that their PR machine is in full swing now, just wait, because this is about to get cray. Initially, Nestle said that it would be glad to offer clarification if I had asked for a response, and so to be fair, I invited them on the show and offered them a platform to set the record straight. But instead, I got this.
Hello, Abby. I'm Stephanie from Nestle. We saw the video you posted on YouTube criticizing Nestle over water, so here's our response.
Thank you, Stephanie, for the prompt response in video form, which I'll play now in full and interject my response since I can't talk to you like a real human being. So please, go on.
You claimed we make a huge profit on bottled water, but the figures you quoted were all wrong. In reality, we pay more for our water than other groundwater users.
First of all, I never said that Nestle pays any less or any more than its competitors. But you know what? She's right. I did quote an incorrect figure. The profit I cited of 53,908,255% was calculated from the Council of Canadians, Canada's largest citizen advocacy organization which receives zero corporate or government funding. According to their website, Nestle pays $3.71 for every million liters of water it pumps from the local watershed, which it then packages in single-use plastic bottles and sells back to the public for as much as $2 million. As Stephanie points out, the insane profit margin of 53 million % doesn't take into account some important costs.
Then you have to add the manufacturing costs, infrastructure, water resource protection, quality control, salaries, storage, distribution. In fact, the profit margin is less than 10%.
You know, 10% doesn't sound like that much, but unfortunately I couldn't find a breakdown of how much Nestle spends on any of those things. However, I did gain some insight on how extensive Nestle's water treatment process is. Turns out that Nestle was recently embroiled in a lawsuit after it was discovered that one of their brands, Ice Mountain, was really just, well, repackaged tap water. Yes, folks, tap water, which, by the way, costs about 2,000 times less when it's not encased in plastic. But even if Nestle is just repackaging tap water, to be fair, I'm still not counting for the cost of extracting oil to make the non-biodegradable plastic water bottles, shipping them around the planet to be consumed in mere minutes, only to be then thrown in the trash and shipped to landfills in India. So what's next?
We take water during droughts in Canada. In fact, we've always reduced our water use during droughts, and will continue to do so. We use less than 1% of the available spring water at Hillsborough in Ontario. The water cycle naturally replenishes every drop of this water.
Wait, millions of gallons of water extracted from lakes and reservoirs will be magically replaced by nature? Okay, So what about during droughts? Well, according to the Huffington Post, the Ontario government tried to put limits on Nestle's water extraction during shortages. But guess what? Being the big, powerful corporation it is, Nestle was able to convince the Ontario Ministry of the Environment to remove the restrictions. Back to you, Stephanie.
Claimed our chairman doesn't believe water is a human right. That's wrong. He does. The whole company does. We've long recognised the human right to water, and we ensure all our people respect it.
Really? Really? You know what? I'm just going to let your boss, Peter Brabeck, chairman and former CEO of Nestle, respond.
Water is, of course, the most important raw material we have today in the world. It is a question of whether we should privatize the normal water supply for the population. And there are two different opinions on the matter. The one opinion, which I think is extreme, is represented by the NGOs, who bang on about declaring water a public right.
Stephanie, your boss just said that thinking of water as a public right is an extreme view, clearly not shared by him, since he then goes on to say that water should be applied a market value just like any other food. Carry on.
There's a global water crisis that threatens food security, and we're determined to help address this.
I couldn't agree with you more, Stephanie. There is a global water crisis, and I'll tell you what's making it worse. The bottled water industry is mining water, taking it away from its public municipal sources and selling it to make a profit. So, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Thank you, Abby, for drawing attention to water. It's an important issue, an important resource. But we would urge you and your viewers to look for the facts about our use of water on our website, Nestle.com.
Stephanie, you're welcome. And thank you for that awesome video with that beautiful green screen landscape. Hey, Stephanie, maybe I'll see you again in Nestle's new ad campaign for Pure Life, a high-end bottled water that targets stylish, rich women. Oh, and did I mention that this new brand will get its water from an endangered salmon fish hatchery in Oregon, according to the state's Department of Fish and Wildlife. But don't worry, Nestle will still be paying the same standard price for this more high-end water. Folks, here's what all this water talk boils down to. Initially, the idea of privatizing a resource that every living thing on Earth depends on was scoffed at, especially considering how water is practically free already. Now, water is a multi-billion-dollar industry that tricks people into essentially buying filtered tap water wrapped in plastic waste. And did I mention that the EPA standards for tap water are much more stringent than the FDA's oversight on bottled water? So really, what is the difference? Look, if there's one thing to take away, it's this. Filter your own water. And not just to save a buck, but to save the future of the Earth.
As many listeners know, our life path experiences prepare us for the role we are to serve, and I do remain grateful for several of the corporations I worked for in my corporate past life, because they revealed to me some of the language and strategies employed to tell employees one thing, the customers another, the public something else, and then there is what is told to shareholders. To look at the website for the corporation, one might think that Nestle is just a pillar of corporate responsibility. It is only when one starts digging to find all the corporate connections and responsibilities that one begins to see that the public message being mass marketed and sold is not exactly what is being practiced. Therefore, one's discernment is always advised when dealing with corporations and their messages, because at this time at least, more often than not, the ethic and practice does not align with the message. For any who may be wondering, or perhaps may even care at all, a somewhat revealing poll has been released in Canada that seems to show just how effective the mainstream media and the Corporation of Canada, led by CEO Stephen Harper, has been in selling the agenda to Canadians. What was once known as the country of Canada appears to have been lost to a corporate takeover, so from now on I'm choosing to identify Canada by the entity in which it currently is serving geopolitically, that of a corporation. An article on the CTV News website on the 4th of September by Sonia Puzik notes that Canadians strongly approve of Ottawa's position on the crisis in Ukraine, but are divided on other foreign policy issues, like whether to send soldiers to Iraq to fight the Islamic State, according to a new poll. The Nanos CTV News poll on foreign policy issues found that 48% of Canadians approve and 28% somewhat approve of the federal government's strong support for Ukraine, even if it jeopardizes Canada's trade with Russia. According to Puzik, the poll also revealed the following. On other foreign policy issues, 47% of Canadians said they disapprove or somewhat disapprove of the Canadian government's strong and vocal support for Israel in the Gaza war. 46% said they approve or somewhat approve. The results offer a pretty clear assessment of how effective media and political propaganda has been to influence Canadians about various issues, even though there appears to be increasing evidence to the contrary that the Corporation of Canada is truly reflecting and acting upon the will of the people. Over to tech news for the week. On August 19th, RT.com reported that several teens have proactively taken the step to create a mobile app that may help protect personal security by keeping tabs on police brutality. The article writes that the application, called 5O, has been designed specifically for mobile phones and encourages users to record and document every encounter they have with police officers. By doing so, users can submit ratings for local law enforcement, allowing people to see how each area's police departments stack up in terms of civil behavior. Speaking with Business Insider, 16-year-old Emma Christian of Decatur, Georgia, said her siblings came up with the idea after regularly hearing reports of police abuse around the United States. We've been hearing about the negative instances in the news. For instance, most recently, the Michael Brown case, and we always try to talk about these issues with our parents, she said. They always try to reinforce that we should focus on solutions. It's important to talk about the issues, but they try to make us focus on finding solutions. That made us think, why don't we create an app to help us solve this problem? Additionally, 5O has a Know Your Rights section featuring information from the American Civil Liberties Union. According to Think Progress, citizens will be able to provide as much background on an incident as they like, and in instances requiring legal action, that data can be sent directly to law enforcement. Christian hopes that the app will be used also for positive interactions, in saying that if someone has a positive interaction with police, for example, an officer saved your cat or was very courteous and professional, we want people to be able to document those as well, she said to BuzzFeed. We hope that law enforcement agencies with positive reviews can help by functioning as role models. In what is yet another sign that Europe is far ahead of North America in terms of moving sustainable technologies forward, an article on the intelligentliving.co website on August 28th by Aaron Jackson is reporting that Europe has taken the step now to approve a new alternative fuel vehicle, one that apparently operates on salt water. The car, called the Quant E Sport Limousine, uses an electrolyte flow cell power system, and the system has now been certified for use on European roads. The vehicle made its debut at the 2014 Geneva Motor Show. The specs on the car are pretty impressive, beyond the fact that it operates on salt water. It is claimed that the vehicle has peak power of 920 horsepower with a top speed of 350 kilometers per hour, with a range of 600 kilometers, and can do 0 to 100 in just under 3 seconds. The article also adds that After an in-depth inspection of the car, the German certification company in Munich handed over the official registration plate. Now the company will be able to test the car on the public roads in Germany and Europe as the company prepares for series production. The flow cell system powering the Quant-E Sport Limousine's 4 electric motors develops electricity from the electrochemical reaction created by 2 electrolyte solutions. This electricity is forwarded to supercapacitors where it's stored and distributed. Nunzio La Vecchia, the visionary behind the new vehicle, was also quoted in an interview as saying that the power density of the nano flow cell at 600 watts per kilogram or per liter is greater than any comparable system. 5 times greater, to be specific. That means you can drive 5 times further with our system than you can with a conventional battery system, including the most state-of-the-art lithium-ion batteries. The system is also extremely safe to operate and environmentally friendly. Most importantly, since there are almost no moving parts and it produces negligible waste heat, it has an efficiency of more than 80%. There has never been anything like it. The chairman of the board of Nano Flow Cell AG, Professor Jens Peter Ellermann, also noted the vast potential for this technology in saying that the potential of the nano flow cell is much greater, especially in terms of domestic energy supplies, as well as in maritime, rail, and aviation technology. The nano flow cell offers a wide range of applications as a sustainable, low-cost, and environmentally friendly source of energy. Is it possible that this is just one of the new technologies that were planned to be released in order to begin tearing down the control structures of the global cabal? It does appear to be that way, at least for now. Moving over to health, the news for this week starts with continued revelations concerning vaccinations, the Center for Disease Control in the U.S., CNN, and yet another cover-up gone bad. Before we get to that specifically, the story started with an article on August 31st by Joe Worgan appearing on the AutismDailyNewscast.com website. Worgan reported that Translational Neurodegeneration, an academic and peer-reviewed journal, published in August findings on the reanalysis of a 2004 paper that had been published in Pediatrics. The paper looked at the measles, mumps, and rubella, or MMR, vaccines, and autism. The reanalysis of the data by Brian Hooker of Simpson University, who is a biochemical engineer, claimed to find a higher rate of vaccination against MMR among a subset, African American boys, of the original study population who developed autism than among those who did not. Hooker claims that this finding was suppressed by the authors of the original paper from the Centers of Disease Control, the CDC. One of the co-authors, William Thompson, released a press release where he states that data was omitted. Part of Thompson's statement read as follows: "My name is William Thompson. I am a senior scientist with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, where I have worked since 1998. I regret that my co-authors and I omitted statistically significant information in our 2004 article published in the journal Pediatrics. The omitted data suggested that African American males who received the MMR vaccine before age 36 months were at increased risk for autism. Decisions were made regarding which findings to report after the data was collected, and I believe that the final study protocol was not followed." As a result of that admission, the editors of Translational Neurodegeneration retracted the paper with a statement saying, "This article has been removed from the public domain because of serious concerns about the validity of its conclusions. The journal and publisher believe that its continued availability may not be in the public interest. Definitive editorial action will be pending further investigation." Jonathan Benson, reporting on the story on the naturalnews.com website on September the 4th, writes that after more than a week of total silence by the mainstream media, CNN has finally admitted that a landmark study recently published in a top scientific journal solidifies a link between the MMR vaccine and autism, but this was only after the journal that first published the study, Translational Neurodegeneration, arbitrarily decided to pull it on spurious claims that its findings may not be in the public interest, suddenly making the topic newsworthy. CNN's Deborah Goldschmidt, in her article on August 28th, reported the following. A study published earlier this month concluded African American boys are more at risk for autism if they're given the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine before the age of 2. The study author says researchers at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention knew about the link in 2004 and covered it up. CDC researchers are standing by their original findings that there is no link between autism and vaccination schedules. The new study was funded by the Focus Autism Foundation, which says it is dedicated to exposing the causes of autism, focusing on the role of vaccinations. The study has since been removed from the public domain pending further investigation, according to Translational Neurodegeneration. Here is the report that accompanied this story.
This was an exhaustive review. They looked at 67 studies done over the past few years on the safety of vaccines, and the conclusions really shouldn't surprise anyone. Vaccines are safe. Now, are they without side effects? Absolutely not. They can have side effects. They can, in extremely rare circumstances, have very bad side effects like seizures or pneumonia or allergic reactions. But you'll notice on that list what's missing, which is autism. Autism is not a side effect of vaccine, or to say it another way, because some people don't hear this well, vaccines do not cause autism. And vaccines do a huge amount of good. Take a look at this number. I think it is really stunning. Let's look at infant mortality in the United States. In 1900, it was 100 deaths for every 1,000 babies born. In 2000, it was 7 deaths per every 1,000 babies born. And vaccines are a huge reason for this, because the world is safer for babies and for infants and for children because of vaccines. So again, this study is very clear. Vaccines are safe and they do a world of good.
But Elizabeth, there's so much passion on this subject. Frankly, so much politics involved, too. We need to focus on the science here. And what we're seeing is whooping cough outbreaks in California. We're seeing measles at levels we haven't seen in a long, long time. Is the lack of vaccination, is that leading to some of these outbreaks?
Absolutely. The lack of vaccination is the reason for many of these outbreaks. Let's take measles, for example. So measles outbreak, huge numbers, haven't seen numbers like this for years. And it started because a group of folks from the Amish community who don't believe in vaccinations went to the Philippines to do relief work. Well, what's rampant in the Philippines? Measles. So you have unvaccinated people going to an area where there's a ton of measles, and some of these folks came back with measles and spread it to others in the community and even beyond their community. So not getting vaccinated doesn't just hurt yourself, it also hurts other people.
But here's the question. You talked about how politicized this has been, how much controversy with certain people, and you even intimated that there's a certain group of people that won't listen to this. Is this enough to silence critics of vaccines?
No. I don't think it is, because I think that people believe so passionately against vaccines that I don't think this is really going to stop. I think they're still going to feel the way that they feel.
CNN reported that it was a new study, when in fact it was a reanalysis of the original study from 2004. CNN reported that the conclusion was that African American boys before the age of 2 were at risk, while the new information suggests it is age 3. CNN claimed it was Brian Hooker of the Focus Autism Foundation that funded the alleged new study, when in fact it was a reanalysis of the original study that revealed the cover-up. This omission would erroneously lead people to conclude that the Focus Autism Foundation had validated that vaccines and autism were not connected, when this appears to not be the case at all. Benson called out CNN on its coverage of the story, writing that the real issue, however, is not this shoddy reporting by CNN, but the fact that a prominent journal claiming to be committed to science decided to pull a study simply because its findings threaten to topple the golden calf of vaccination. Benson sums it up in writing that top CDC officials were instructed to manipulate and withhold data linking MMR to autism, resulting in the declaration that MMR is safe even after it was shown that some children are up to 340% more likely to develop autism if they receive the shot before 36 months of age. Benson implied that the scientist, Dr. William Thompson, had perhaps been plagued with guilt and came forth as a whistleblower to clear the air and deconstruct the myth that MMR is safe. As a result, it was only then that the media picked up the story because, as Benson alleges, if the study was retracted, it must have been false, meaning that there was no link between autism and vaccines. The story does not bode well for translational neurodegeneration and its status as a reputable scientific journal. Sayer Ji, the founder of the greenmedinfo.com website, wrote a letter to Professor Shengdi Chen, the editor for Translational Neurodegeneration, questioning his personal integrity and that of the journal. In one part, Ji noted, "The decision raises concerns as to your culpability in a cover-up. You should know that your decision is being perceived as a threat to the credibility of your journal and career as an esteemed scientist. Given the legal implications of your decision to potentially collude with a now verified cover-up involving the falsification of scientific data related to vaccine science and autism, would you be willing to make a statement to defend your decision? I have copied a wide range of legal, journalistic, and scientific stakeholders in this communication and hope you can clear up what appears to be a precautionary decision on your part, which I hope can be clarified in detail." As of airtime, it is unknown as to whether Shengdi has replied to this letter. Also related to the vaccine story, an undated article appearing on the worldtruth.tv website is offering links to documents in English, French, and Spanish that people can take to their doctors and have them fill out before they administer vaccinations to your children. The article writes that if you are pressured by any physician to vaccinate, please download and print this form. WorldTruth.tv invites people to return to them a copy of a signed document, and they have yet to report receiving any. The website adds, "Assertively state to your doctor that it is the only way you will be fully informed to consider vaccination, and that an analysis of the risks and benefits will better allow you to evaluate the decision." Links to all the documents will be available in the show summary. On a broader note, a question that is worth thinking about might be this one. If vaccines are truly safe, why would politicians be so inclined to legislate their use when they are also so busy passing legislation that allows corporate profiteering from fluoride in water, chemtrails in our skies, toxins in our foods, dangerous genetic modifications when they are being banned worldwide, while also making healthy food out of the price range of the general population that can't afford it, among so many other things? When they are legally killing us on so many levels, including unlawful wars for profit, what makes their statements that vaccines are healthy for us any more meaningful? An interesting development may be in the process of being revealed as events in Ukraine continue to unfold. It is apparent that there are people within the corridors of power in Kiev that want to move in a more European direction. There are also many people in Ukraine who want that country to align more with Europe. But as RT reported on August 30th, this membership may come with a high price. RT spoke with Frederick Mousseau, policy director at the Oakland Institute, about what the IMF $17 billion loan will do to the most fertile lands on the continent. Mousseau warns that in accepting this loan, Ukraine could also become a testing ground for GMOs because the current ban on GMOs would be lifted. When asked if this means that farmers will be growing modified crops, Mousseau responded that this is very likely because there is a lot of pressure from the biotechnology industry, such as Monsanto, to have these approved in Ukraine. It is also part of the EU Association Agreement, which has a particular article which calls for the expansion of biotechnology and GMOs in Ukraine. It appears that Monsanto has vested interests there. Mousseau told RT that in 2013, Monsanto invested $140 million in new seed plans in Ukraine. It is clearly the breadbasket of Europe, and it is a key target for a company like Monsanto, which sees this huge potential for production and this huge market. Europe has been quite resistant in allowing GMOs, but if they are successful in Ukraine, then there might be a domino effect in Europe. When asked if this was a coincidence or a pre-planned action back in December of 2013 when the ban on GMOs was lifted in Ukraine, just weeks before an IMF loan, Mousseau replied, "It can't be a coincidence because we have seen a very strong mobilization of the industry and the agro-business in lobbying the government and the EU to have these changes in the legislation. Also, we have seen this investment coming in prior to any adoption of GMOs. So clearly this pressure was there, and to have such a clause in the EU Association Agreement means that the lobbyists in the industry must have been at work for months before that." With all the anti-GMO feelings around the world, would it be beneficial for Ukraine to rely on US-based GMO crops? Mousseau explains that it comes as a part of an agreement with the EU, and we know that European citizens and farmers are against GMOs. But still, we have a deal with the European Union, who have worked out a deal with Ukraine to expand the use of GMOs. It seems like it has been something that has been arranged by the lobbyists of corporations and the civil servants within the European Commission. We have seen all over the world that this is not beneficial for farmers. It is not beneficial to citizens. It is just in the interest of the corporations who are taking over control of seeds used by farmers around the world. The food that is produced does not become better or cheaper. Mousseau also commented on the dangers to the most fertile soil in Europe, saying that we have seen in the US, where GMO crops have been cultivated for a couple of decades now, we have concerns about the quality of soil because the use of GMOs comes with a high level of the use of fertilizers, and this destroys a lot of the organic materials in the soils. There is also a very high risk of contamination for those farmers who choose not to use GMOs, and we have seen this very clearly in North America, where there has been a lot of contamination. The European Parliament is there to present the image of democracy, that the people believe that they have elected representatives. The European Commission could perhaps be considered the shadow government, the unelected body that has the real power of control. Corporations like Monsanto do business on the corporate level with the corporate entity of governance. So while farmers and countries are being forced to adhere to commercial rules that have been set up with companies like Monsanto, this company will now have direct access to destroying the most fertile lands in Europe. Is $17 billion in bailouts that the people will never see really worth it? And in this week's final words. Before taking my vacation, I engaged in a short dialogue with Nancy Detweiler, who has the website Pathway to Ascension and also the Way of Love blog. We were discussing some of the rising energies that were bringing up many issues for healing within so many people, consciously and unconsciously. We were also discussing how the global cabal may be infiltrating the Lightworker movement and contributing to the confusion and misinformation that faces us on a daily basis. Now, if I could just jump off this topic briefly to share a comment. I would like to clarify that I realize there are individuals out there who no longer choose to call themselves light workers, and there are those who no longer resonate with terms like New Age movement, etc., etc. There is validity to this argument because in reality, these terms suggest yet another kind of label of separation within humanity, as though there are people who are somehow more blessed because they are light workers, and other people who are somehow less blessed because they are not. The truth, as it resonates with me in this current moment of now, is that every soul that is capable of contributing to the awakening of human consciousness is fulfilling a higher purpose in the overall shift. Even those among us whom we place within this group known as the Global Cabal or the Illuminati, and those who align themselves to the Zionist agenda or any other service that might be considered less than life-honoring at a higher vibrational level, but still essential to the human experience at a 3D level of vibration. The only reason that some among us are able to have this experience of ourselves as light workers or as awakened souls is because there were other loving souls who took on the role of forgetting who they are more deeply than perhaps we did. It is because of this that the human journey towards knowing who we are through the experiences of who we are not became possible. We could never have had this opportunity to share our awakened divine being within us had there not been souls to play the roles of those who hurt, disempower, and enslave us. The journey for them is to remember who they are. The journey for those who are perhaps more aware is to stay grounded in love and develop the compassion, the patience, and the forgiveness that will be strong enough to assist even the most forgetful among us to begin remembering his or her divine being within. Maybe we aren't light workers. We are merely souls serving in our uniquely different, equally beautiful capacity to help create the experience of heaven on earth, or the manifesting of unconditional love within a physical level of vibration. Our less aware brothers and sisters are teaching us the patience, compassion, strength, love, and forgiveness through their choices to hold off their own awakening. At a higher level, they have done this for our benefit. They also need our love and our help. Now, having said this, there are perhaps souls who have perhaps so completely forgotten themselves that it will be almost impossible for them to awaken at this time on earth. I might argue that, yes, there must have indeed been some souls who agreed to come here knowing that they would never awaken and that they would perhaps choose, or maybe be sent to, another 3D experience after having fulfilled their roles here at this time. This brings me back to the point that I was wanting to make about the Global Cabal infiltrating the group of souls who are choosing to serve in a more awakened and aware capacity. Those who are energetically in tune can sense and feel that significant changes are happening. There are those who may feel something, but have no idea how to explain or identify it. The Global Cabal is losing its power. How might we know this experientially? It is by the very fact that they consider the awakened souls so much of a threat that they have to try to infiltrate in order to beat us, because nothing else has worked for them. It might be safe to assume, therefore, that we are doing something right, because the Global Cabal souls need to bring their fight much closer to home. The act of bringing this fight closer to us also runs the risk of the Global Cabal souls developing the Stockholm Syndrome and falling in love with the awakened energy, to borrow an analogy. There have been messages from members of our galactic families that some of them have come down to walk among us, but some of them are unable to stay for long because the vibration is too dense and very hard on them. The same could be said for the Cabal souls among us. Our galactic energies are gently trying to lift us up to a higher vibration so we can be prepared to exist among them, and we are trying to lift up the remaining unawakened souls so that they may be able to exist lovingly, peacefully, and in a life-honoring way among us. Within this service, however, came a form of complacency, and this was something else that Nancy and I discussed. Oftentimes, we are told to focus only on the positive and do not focus on the negative. Now, there is perhaps an element of truth to this, but as I have noted in the past, truth is relative to each soul in each moment of now. Some souls, perhaps Buddhist monks in Asia, for example, are serving a purpose to focus only on holding and anchoring the energies for the changes we are now experiencing. Other souls may require the experience of focusing only on the positive in order to learn relevant lessons. Some souls, like many of us, are perhaps answering the call to step into the energies of darkness to help transform them from within. It is really not our place to judge what other souls should or should not do because we do not know at what level that soul is serving. The best that we can do is to try as lovingly as possible to empower that soul to serve with the greatest amount of love, compassion, peace, courage, and forgiveness possible, and trust that they will be guided to honor their respective truths for the highest good of all at this time. There is something else that could also be addressed right now. As I am seeing it personally, there are those among us whom some might consider spiritual celebrities, people who are famous and now exceptionally wealthy because they have successfully marketed their books, tools, workshops, messages, or whatever else as a catch-all solution. In other words, they forgot that each soul is uniquely different, and therefore not every soul is going to resonate with certain books, tools, sessions, workshops, messages, or whatever else. Although perhaps having the best of intentions, they have profited excessively on souls that have not received benefit from their work. Now, this is neither right, wrong, good, nor bad. This is part of learning who we are through those experiences of who we are not. We have to go through at least a few of those experiences in order to learn to grow. We begin to develop discernment when we see, observe, or feel that something is not working for us, or it will not work for us. A certain group of souls assumed a role of a spiritual celebrity, perhaps to model the manifestation of one's truth towards creating abundance, and perhaps the more humble among them quietly put lots of money back into service without flashing it around publicly. We are being given the opportunity to learn how to handle abundance through those who may not have used it in the most life-honoring of ways. We learn from the experiences of having less. Well, I mean less in terms of financial abundance, because I know that all of you are so very blessed in what you are helping to co-create for humanity, our planet, and our benevolent galactic families at this time. So although these labels we give ourselves, or these labels that we give to those who have not yet remembered who they are, although they may help some souls on some level, it is a stepping stone, perhaps, towards a coming moment of now when the labels are no longer necessary because we will have all reached a respective space of being human, but with the awareness and presence of divine nature in service to life in all its manifestations. Create a wonderful week! Until our next moment of now. So that is the Unfolding Consciousness news around the world this week. Cosmic Vision News is a part of the Enlight radio group of programs. Links to stories used in this broadcast are published in the show summary on the blog at cosmicvisionnews.com, on the CVN Facebook page, and also on Twitter, Google+, and LinkedIn. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I'm Jeffrey West, reminding you that life is not measured by the number of breaths we take, but by the number of moments that take our breath away. Until our next moment of now, stay grounded in love, hold the vision of light and peace in your hearts, and keep your eyes to the skies. Disclosure is unfolding all around you. Namaste.